Okay, welcome to the kickoff 2021 event for the Credit Union Analytics User Group, hosted today by the Tableau Credit Union User Group. Our topic today is Build It or Buy It, how to evaluate data warehouse solutions. And I have to say that this has been one of our most asked topics to cover in the group, and I am really excited for today's panelist lineup. A couple quick housekeeping things. If you have any questions or issues, please go ahead and use them or introduce yourself in the chat box on Zoom. And if you have questions you already know you want to ask any of the panelists, let's use the Q&A box there. Put it in the wrong place, we'll figure it out, but we will be doing Q&A at the end of the session. So that is the place and we will not skip you. If you have anything you'd like to ask, put it there, and otherwise, let's get started. Today's agenda, we're going to kick off with just a couple updates on what's coming ahead. And then Kyle Stutzman from Pure IT Solutions will lead off our content for today about finding the data warehouse for you and all of the considerations and industry trends around that. Johnny Connell from Arkatechture will give a little more context around specific solutions, the benefits, and some of the best practices. And then Mark Pelletier from St. Mary's Bank Credit Union, which of course I always have to call out was America's first credit union up in New Hampshire. We'll be rounding out with the credit union perspective on this and what they're doing and what their successes have been. We'll end up with Q&A at the end. So I do encourage you to go ahead and put things in the Q&A box. We will get to you either during the session or during the Q&A. And again, if you have any questions, if you have anything you need from us, use the chat box. So I am Charlotte Taft. I am the Senior Director of Business Intelligence at Callahan. And this is, as the coordinator rather than the leader of the Credit Union Tableau User Group, I've had the great privilege of bringing this kind of group together to talk about issues that are facing lots of folks in the industry. And without further ado, I wanted to just do a quick highlight of what we've got coming up next month. In February, we'll be talking to Nicole Lopez and Brewster Knowlton for our February event. And I will go ahead and hand over to Nicole to do a little bit of a preview of that. And then we will jump into today's data warehouse discussion. Okay, over to you, Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlotte. So for next month, we're going to be diving into a little bit of how we use the Knowlton Group's VeriQ platform, and specifically how we've used it to generate some analytics in light of the current pandemic. And so really excited to share that with you all. And hopefully there's something that you can find a value in there that you can apply to what you're all doing at your organizations.
I don't think there's anything I can add to that, Nicole. So looking forward to next month.
Wonderful. I will put the link for everyone to the February event in the chat in just a moment. But without further ado, I do want to hand over to Kyle Stutzman. He is with Pure IT Solutions, which is a CUSO. And I do love a CUSO, even though I am with a vendor, technically, a supplier, however you want to call it. Kyle comes to us, I think he's in Texas, and he has handed over his screen share already. That's perfect. And I just wanted to thank him for jumping in and giving us some industry context from the CUSO perspective, which we actually haven't touched on in this group so much. So Kyle, thank you. And here we go. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to be able to kick things off, share a little bit about what we're seeing across the credit union industry. Just as a short introduction, you know, heard my name, it's Kyle Stutzman. I'm one of the co-founders of our CUSO. We've been in existence about 4 years, and our whole focus has really been around strategy and roadmaps for credit unions across the country. And that's extremely important when it comes to data warehouses. It's extremely important when you're talking about a data journey, a technology journey, a security journey. And we see those all completely intertwined, especially when you're coming to a decision on buy versus build, or what you're going to do with a data warehouse and how that's going to impact your overall vision. Just wanted to start with a slide. We like our groups of three. It helps for some communication that we have with each other and with some of our credit unions. But the assess, the remediate, the fix, the shore up, the things we're working on, and then how is it manageable or maintained ongoing? How do we look at people and process and business management when it's related to data journeys or a data warehouse? And then how does technology, data, and security programs mature? how do they interweave with each other is extremely important. As credit unions are making those decisions from CEO down on what they need to do for our data journey and what value they're getting, it helps to have a framework to start talking around those items and to get a sense of where you're at. So a lot of what our credit unions are doing across the country this year are looking at where they really at in their current data journeys, what information they have at their forefront. The slide on the right, or the graph on the right, is really about survival, being reactive, being proactive, service focused, value focused, and then truly partnering with the business. And as you think about what you're trying to accomplish, it's important to know where you're at and where you're trying to get in order to make that right choice on whether you can successfully build something yourself, or successfully partner with someone, or successfully buy something and partner to get to where you want to head. So this is a framework that we often work with credit unions on any sort of these journeys. It's an important one to use as a framework when we're talking through data warehouse solutions and what you want to buy. Really, a current state of the industry is that and you're on this call, so this probably isn't a surprise to you. Every credit union has some data initiative, some BI initiative. The thing with our industry, though, is it's fairly fractured about where those data sources are. And I'm sure you experience it like all of our credit unions do. You may have great access to the core. You may have great access to a lending system. You may have some great reporting out of a plastics resources vendors, wherever that data sits. But often those aren't coming together in the way you need them to have a holistic view of what's happening. But every credit union across our industry has these initiatives for the coming year in some manner or another. The interesting part is, what are those drivers that are driving them, and how can you get everyone behind that? When we talk data warehouse, we think that's important because of how splintered things are. We're seeing drivers across industry, of course, right now around things around credit and lending decisions, around operational management, tools, data sets that can be used, operational efficiency, business decisions for the executive team, reporting to the board. But we see some other areas around fraud and risk, which is a driver for some institutions, especially as the world is changing. Our service models are changing so that they know how members' behavior is changing. I think what's really important and exciting is that more and more credit unions are looking to have a strategic business decision around data. They want to have a holistic view of their data and have it all combined because they want to get to predictive modeling. They want to get to how members' behavior trends are happening so that they can actually make proactive decisions and partnering decisions with the business and not be reactive or just after the fact working with data. So that's probably the biggest trend we're seeing, is really a switch in mindset to not just look for a tool, but to change the whole data strategy and journey. So when it comes to those factors, it's really important to have a key factor, a key driver that's really going to help start changing your culture and get people surrounding it. That's key for all of our credit unions. But when it comes to the build versus buy, there's really some difficult decisions credit unions are getting into about what is it that they really need. But those conversations become very healthy and important for their strategy. And I'm going to share a couple things that are coming up in those build versus buy decisions. And I know other speakers are going to get into them in more depth. So I'm just going to share a little bit of a highlight and some information around them. I didn't think I had much of a bias, and we at Pure IT try not to have a bias, vendor agnostic around tool sets and decisions, because it really is what needs to fit your credit union. But what's happened in the last 2 years versus what was happening 4, 5, 6 years ago is that those decisions around buy versus build seem to be changing slightly. The credit unions are realizing that they need to have things like a development team. They're needing to have possibly a DevOps team if they're wanting to have it more hosted or in a cloud solution. They need to have true DBA resources that understand data structures and how everything's going to come together. And then they need to, of course, have that data owned somewhere in the institution. Who's going to be the data scientists, who's going to be the data analysts that help cover this. And so as we start to help credit unions talk through these things for their strategy or roadmaps, they have to truly evaluate where their people and processes and abilities lie in those areas to help evaluate whether building is possible or risk buying is possible, and which will get them to the business value. Because while this discussion is about data warehouse build versus buy, most credit unions and executives are not looking to what is the tool alone. The tool is just a resource that gets me to my business value. You want to get as quickly as you can to what's going to be helping your credit union, your strategy, and your members. And so you don't want your tool set, whether you're building it yourself or implementing someone else's or working with a partner to do a version of both, you don't want that to be the delay to getting to the business value. In fact, the quickest path you can get there that still meets your needs is where credit unions are leaning in 2021. So we know there's a couple credit unions I'm going to share. I'm sure other more positive examples, but we have both seen and come in after the fact to help with credit unions that took great steps forward a number of years ago with key resources, but it was based on one person. So in a build versus buy decision, one key resource is not a very sustainable path forward. And it seems obvious to say that now, but we often do this throughout our institutions. It's just a common step where we know maybe that seems like the simplest path forward. And what is happening across all of our credit unions and in the partners we talk to and in the consulting that we get involved with, as well as the projects, is it's much more of a team approach. And it's much more of a community that's now working together, both in the credit union and with each other to strengthen and mature data in our industry. And that's probably the most exciting thing that we're seeing happen, is that you can build with a lot of large credit unions are taking on that effort, but they're often doing it with key partners that are guiding them so that they have a sustainable long-term path. Or you can buy, and with the right solution and partner, that can be a very quick effort to move ahead and have a lot of flexibility to expand that throughout the whole institution. So I want to end just with a few comments before I pass on this to the next speaker. Just really the focus is a simple graph like this can have a handy conversation and a very beneficial conversation really with an executive team of where are you spending and what is that investment and what are you getting out of it. I know that seems like a simple concept, but sometimes a little graph that says, you know, we can put this much effort in now to get this much value and we can take a step forward. And any value you can get out of a project is extremely important, just as long as you're keeping that long-term view in play. So we encourage credit unions as they're thinking through the buy versus build to think about the cultural change that will have happened in most institutions, to think about data and use data, to think about quick wins that can get you buy-in throughout the institutions, throughout your operational groups, as well as the long-term view, to involve multiple departments and multiple leaders in order to make that decision and make sure you can carry it forward, and to find a good partner that can provide guidance or a sounding board or maybe a starting architecture for you to move ahead with. In the end, you need champions that are really about the data, who can share that value and report back on ROI, and you want that collaboration internally and externally. And that's what's going to really drive our credit unions forward for 2021 and beyond as they make this difficult decision buy versus build. But you have to ask those difficult questions if your credit union is really set up to build something, or whether you're really set up to partner and find a good solution that you can then carry forward and get all the value on the member side, on the implementation side, on the business side. And so while both are valuable for credit unions, as far as trends go, we see a lot more credit unions looking to solutions that they can implement and get to that business value quicker.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kyle. That was super useful. And I do encourage people, we will send out the deck after this with Kyle's contact information if you have questions. And otherwise, I'm handing over to you, Johnny, if you want to go ahead and share. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Kyle.
Awesome. And no, that was great, Kyle. Appreciate your perspective. I think every time that me and Kyle speak, I hear him say, process precedes technology. And I love what you mentioned about, you know, executives aren't necessarily just looking for a tool. They're really focused on the overall data journey and making sure that they have that right strategy in place. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Johnny Connell. I'm the head of sales over at Arkatechture. I'm actually bit newer to both the organization as well as the industry as a whole. And the reason I mention that is because even in just the few months that I've been on board, there've been really two things that I continue to hear come up time and time again whenever I'm speaking with customers. One is, why do I need a data warehouse? And two is, should I build it or should I buy it? And I think both are fair questions. When I first heard of Tableau and some of the other business intelligence providers out there, this was back when I was working in the management consulting world, and I'd have clients ask me if they really even needed a visualization tool. You know, they felt like they didn't necessarily have enough data, let alone quality data, in order to even justify the cost of visualizing it or layering analytics on top. But I think when you fast forward to today, it's more or less table stakes, where you're expected to either have a business intelligence tool or to at least be considering it. And the question comes down to oftentimes, you know, who's the best vendor to go with? And I think what I really find interesting about that all these years later, despite business intelligence and data warehousing being more of a household term nowadays, I still hear from customers who don't know what to do with their data, not necessarily because they don't have enough data like before a couple years ago, but now it's more the opposite, where they have so much data that they don't necessarily know how to make sense of it all. I think back to a client that I had several years ago who was the head of marketing operations at a larger software company. And I was sitting across the table from him in a conference room, and he said, "Johnny, when I first started in this profession, I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't have any data. I figured that if I could just collect and track as much data as I could, then at least I could make more informed decisions and figure out how to strategically impact the organization." And he said, you know, fast forward to today, 10 years later, now I'm sitting on a mountain of data. I'm more informed than I ever was, and yet I still feel just as lost as before. And it was a really good conversation because towards the end of it, this light bulb kind of went off in his head where he said, I think what I've been missing is the difference between information and intelligence, where before I was making decisions blind based on gut feel, based on assumptions. Then all of a sudden I started collecting data. I was able to make informed decisions, but I didn't know how quality that data was. And so for all I know, those were misinformed decisions that was based off of poor data that I was using to try and impact the business. And he said, it's really only after you start to integrate and cleanse and append and conform and maintain the integrity of your data that you can truly use analytics to make intelligent decisions. And so in answer to that first question that I hear from credit unions pretty frequently, I think that's why you need a data warehouse. I have clients ask me if we can take a flat file and throw some pretty visuals on it. The answer is yes, we can definitely give you a dashboard to more easily visualize and interpret the data. But if the data itself is outdated or just isn't quality, you know, maybe there's missing information, maybe there's conflicting information in other systems, then the dashboard just isn't going to help you. And so I think it's really critically important to keep in mind that the interpretation and the analysis of your data is only as good as the quality of the data itself. And so this visual here is what we call the lean data pipeline. It's part data lake, it's part data warehouse. There's a number of different terms out there. I think I even heard the term data lake house the other day, which I thought was clever. But regardless of what you call it, the general idea here is that you need a data warehouse or a lean data pipeline solution to help solve the puzzle of your data and help you make those intelligent decisions. So essentially how this works is, you know, on the left-hand side, you have different siloed data sources, your core banking platform, your LOS, your online banking system, dozens of different sources of data, but the challenge is they don't always speak to each other. And Kyle, I think you were just touching on this, is they're not always connected, and you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at how many clients tell us that they can't necessarily even define what a member is. You know, depending on what data source or system they're looking at, could be a dozen different ways, whether it's mailing address, social security number, member ID, et cetera. So what a lean data pipeline does, or a data warehouse does in this type of solution, is take all those disparate systems, create a single source of truth, and essentially extract the data, load it into a data lake, transform it through a conformed data warehouse with different business subject areas and accompanying data dictionaries. And then it allows you to focus on that visualization, that business intelligence, where you can have dashboards and actionable analytics layered on top. So really the reason I show this, though, is more that bottom layer, that feedback piece. And this gets back to what I was mentioning earlier about the quality of the data. I think that's the ultimate benefit to having a data warehouse solution, regardless of whether you build it or buy it, is being able to identify and fix those data quality errors so that, again, you can make those data-driven, intelligent decisions that drive growth, business transformation, and member experience. So I think once you establish that you need that lean data pipeline solution or that data warehouse solution, the question then becomes, should you build it or should you buy it? And I'll give you the answer, or at least my answer, before I give the reasoning. And I think that it depends. For some, it will make sense to build it. For some, it will make sense to buy it. For some, on-premise may be the best fit. For others, cloud may be the right approach. I think there are a number of different variables and nuances where really no one's going to understand your business as well as you do. So the answer to build versus buy is ultimately it depends on the ecosystem or the environment that you're working in. But I think regardless of what you choose, the number one recommendation I can give is to not go it alone, because making that choice and making sure that it's the right choice is going to be critically important to success down the road. And so just a little story, I learned that the hard way firsthand. So my daughter is about a year and a half old and was recently going through a sleep regression, except it wasn't quite a regression because it had actually been about 8 to 10 months where she'd wake up at midnight and then 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m. and need to be soothed back to sleep every time. So we started to explore what it would look like to move her from a crib to a toddler bed. And she was a little young at the time, but had shown some cognitive development and maturity in other areas. So we figured it's worth a shot. Maybe if we could help her not feel trapped or confined to her crib at night, she'd start to embrace those moments when she woke up. She'd be able to use her imagination, explore the different colors and textures around her room with different toys, books, etc. And selfishly, I'd get to sleep a little more. So being the self-proclaimed very amateur woodworker that I am, I decided that I was going to set out to build her a bed. So spent hours researching safety standards, drawing up different plans, picked out, purchased all the wood, and ultimately estimated it'd take about 20 hours or so to build it from start to finish. I think the first realization that I had and where things started to go wrong was that I didn't take into account the fact that I have a day job. So the wood sat there and it sat there and it sat there. It's probably 3 months before I was finally able to carve out a weekend to actually spend time building it. But then the next realization that I had was there were a few different tools that I didn't have. So I had to go to the hardware store, pick those up, came back, realized there were a couple different materials I didn't have enough of. So I had to go back and get more of that. So a number of different delays throughout the process, and it was
Oh, Johnny, I think we lost your sound there for a second. We will give him a second there. Appreciate it, everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. I have several, including jumping off just from how to get started, depending on your shop size, key mistakes, and what kind of roles are really key to making sure this process works well. Okay, I'm going to give him one more moment. Okay. Johnny, are you back?
Charlotte, can you hear me?
Sure can now. Perfect. That was well timed. Excellent.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened, but we'll press on here. Let me share my screen here again.
Great.
Perfect. So again, apologies for that. I know I was leaving everyone with eager anticipation as to what happened next. But I think where I was mentioning really towards probably 3/4 of the way into trying to build this bed and setting out to finish the completion of it, I realized probably the most critical realization, which is I'm just not that good of a woodworker. And it was definitely a blow to the ego. And I had built, my own bed, had built my own desk, our dining room table, a couple other things. But when it came to my daughter's bed, there was so much customization involved. There were so many intricate details I wanted to include. There were, all natural wood joinery as opposed to screws, a number of different things that a fine craftsman of a woodworker would be able to do, but personally I wasn't able to. And so long story short, you fast forward to the end, and it was about 6 months or so of this unfinished project with a number of different delays that ultimately led to me having to make the difficult decision, again, a bit of a bruise to my ego, to buy her a bed for Christmas this past year. So the reason I mention all that, what does this actually have to do with a data warehouse solution? I think looking back, there were a few different things I wish someone had told me before I set out to build that bed. And I think a lot of those recommendations hold true for building versus buying a lean data pipeline or data warehouse solution as well. So first and foremost is that building allows you to customize. You can do whatever you want when you're building. In the case of the bed, I could choose the type of wood, the thickness of the wood, the finish, everything else. And I think that's true with a data warehouse build as well. You can choose what technologies you want to use. Do you want to rip and replace existing technologies that you already have in order to choose different components to go into your lean data pipeline? Do you want to use those in-house technologies to save on costs and help accelerate the building process? Do you want to build it completely from scratch? Are there specific metrics or KPIs you want to focus on? How are you going to integrate the different source systems? Is it going to be a real-time connection or something that maybe happens once a day or once a week? Are there specific dashboards or visualizations you want to include? There's so many different ways that you can customize a build that I think makes it really appealing to a lot of individuals. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that the buying can also provide a level of customization. I think a lot of solution providers, especially today, will provide flexibility to leverage your existing technology stack, or at least components of it, so that you don't have to recreate the wheel. And when it comes to specific metrics or dashboards, something as simple as a sandbox can allow you to fully customize and tailor the visualizations to what your credit union uniquely cares about. I think the number 2 consideration that I have here is really to think about the cost. When I went in to build the bed, I figured it'd be a lot cheaper than buying one. And I don't think that it makes sense. Why wouldn't the raw materials without the labor be cheaper than the finished product? Well, like I said, there were a number of tools and materials that I figured out along the way that I ended up needing to go out and purchase. So, you put a couple pieces of wood together, it sounds pretty simple, but when you need a table saw, a miter saw, a couple different hand saws, a planer, a marking gauge, a sander, the list goes on, it ends up becoming a lot more expensive. So pay attention to the costs associated with building versus buying. A lot of times you can save costs when buying just because it's a scalable, repeatable process that the solution provider already has in place. It allows for economies of scale, volume-based pricing, versus buying or versus building. Oftentimes there's a number of hidden costs that may come up the way. So think through those tangential costs that may not be part of the actual build or even the actual buy up front. It may be down the road with training or ongoing support. It may be the cost of bringing new systems together once you've already implemented whatever solution you're working with, or it may be the cost of converting a new core system or whatever it may be. So think through those hidden costs and do that cost benefit analysis. Next one is skill, and I think that ties right into the cost as well. Ultimately, I didn't have the skills that I needed to build the bed that I wanted to. I think when you're going through a build versus buy comparative analysis, you need to make sure that you're looking at, do you have the in-house personnel that you need? If not, who do you need to hire, whether it's developers, architects, data scientists, project managers, whoever it may be. Make sure that you have the right plan in place to hire, to onboard, and to focus their efforts. And that's another thing is, even if you do have the in-house personnel, like I said before, I had a day job, which made building a little more difficult. So what's their day job? Are they already focused on other projects, or can they free up their time in order to focus on the actual build? And then lastly, think through that time piece again. Oftentimes it can take upwards of 3 years for the build versus 3 to 6 months for the buy. Not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but to Kyle's point earlier, you want to be focused on time to value. So what happens when a critical resource ends up leaving halfway through the build, or you need to focus on getting it up to speed quickly? So consider the time implications, and again, also look at the ongoing time considerations that's going to pop up as well post-launch, whether it's the training or the ongoing support, et cetera. There's a couple others that I have listed here just for the sake of time. I won't go into details, but again, I think there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer to building versus buying, but regardless of what you choose, make sure that you're putting together that comparative analysis, make sure that you're focused on the cost benefit analysis, and ultimately make sure that you don't go it alone, whether it's internal personnel, subject matter experts that you have at your disposal, whether it's external looking at consultants or folks that can help with project management, staff augmentation, or on the buy side, a managed service provider, whoever it is. I would just caution and recommend that you not go it alone. And ultimately, we at Arkatechture, we've seen both paths work. I think Mark, who's going to speak from St. Mary's in a minute, is a really powerful testament that kind of flirts the line. At the time, it was a build and absolutely the right decision. At the same time, fast forward to today, and Arkatechture's been able to take some of the learnings there and scale it to other credit unions through more of a buy approach. So again, not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but don't go it alone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Johnny. Mark, I want to introduce Mark from St. Mary's, who again is coming out of New Hampshire, at least the institution is. And very excited to see where things are, and handing over to you, Senior Data Analyst at St. Mary's Bank/Credit Union.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
All right, great. Thanks everybody. I appreciate you having me here today. Kyle and Johnny definitely set me up really well. I have a few connections there that I'd like to touch on in a moment. So I was asked to speak today to everybody about what it might be to put together a data warehouse or a reporting solution, staffing wise, and also the benefits of once you have that in place, what that kind of looks like. I also wanted to talk about maybe the staffing changes that might be needed at your credit union, what the differences are and what those analysts might be doing now and what they might be doing in the future. And also maybe give you guys a little bit more clarity into what that path might be once you guys make some decisions. And hopefully I can help bridge that gap and answer any questions and bring my experience to the table. Again, my name is Mark Pelletier. I've been working in databases, ETL solutions, reporting for over 10 years now. I've worked for hospitals, financial institutions, internet service providers, and a brief collections agency ETL job, which was brief. And I also, I've been working at St. Mary's now for about 3 years. And at the moment, we're building up our team here to be more talented than we already are. We're trying to be agile, and we're trying to get credit union a little bit further into the future and using our current partner as a stepping stone here. And a fun fact, which syncs up with a previous presenter here, I'm actually a woodworker. When I'm not working at St. Mary's, I build and sell woodworking, anything from furniture to cabinetry, anything like that. It's just a little something simple to take my mind off a busy project at work. So it's pretty funny that kind of worked out.
So Mark,
Right.
you do toddler beds then?
I've designed toddler beds and I've built one before, so too funny.
We'll compare notes after this.
But if you need a hand, let me know. All right, so let's get moving here. So just a few to start off here. I want to kind of go over the points I want to make today. The first portion, I want to give you guys some pointers on evaluating your current environment at your credit union and kind of take inventory of your staffing resources and also any technology you might have that you could potentially either sunset or bring into the new environment. Maybe there's some way you can mesh those together with your new solution. The second part, I want to take a look at once you've chosen that path, building or buying, what the support might look like within your credit union, what those people might be doing, and maybe some differences in what they're doing now and what they might be doing in the future. And the third portion, I want to kind of talk about some of our successes, the work we've done here at St. Mary's, and kind of talk about the benefits of what we have and what you guys could have for a new environment like this and what the possibilities might be. And before I get started, I wanted to kind of engage everybody today. And I wanted to ask a question, and hopefully you guys can, we can talk about this in the Q&A after, or we don't get to it. I'm more than happy to reach out. But what is one reporting issue that you guys would like to solve? Something maybe just small, something small that you don't have the tools currently today that you're looking for a data warehouse to help you guys solve, and we can maybe touch on that afterwards. All right. So this first portion, we're talking about evaluating and our current situation at your credit union. And kind of the first portion is understanding a full picture of what you guys are starting off with, your head count, or what kind of staff you have currently in place. And maybe you guys already have a data team started at your credit union, maybe you're a little bit more advanced, or maybe you guys are still in a situation where you have an analyst in each department that's pulling data directly from source systems and sending that to executives or whomever, your SPG team. And you're working on directly from the source system, and that might not be working out for you. And maybe there's even a few people here on the call that are VPs that don't even have any analysts in their department, and they're pulling their own numbers, and they'd like to move forward a little bit. So I think that that's something worth mentioning. And kind of looking at and evaluating the headcount and the people and the skills that you have currently is extremely important. It's a big part of understanding where you might want to go in the future for your data warehouse, your reporting solutions, and taking note of that and understanding what those people bring to the table, and really mending it together and understanding what you might need to add once you have that new solution. And I also want to make sure that you think about the available capacity of these individuals in these departments. And I think like I think it was Kyle that mentioned that earlier, that sometimes we really like to try and add a lot to people's plates, even though they're at 100% capacity, and try to mash in a new data warehouse or mash in a new reporting solution, and trying to add all this extra, server support and building out new reports or whatever it might be. It really brings them up to that 110% level, and you're really not going to do yourself any favors by not understanding what the current capacity is of those individuals, either analyst or maybe an IT department individual. And sticking with technology too, I want to make sure you guys think about taking inventory of the software you might already have. Maybe you guys already are a little bit more advanced. You guys might have some automation tools in place that could, like I mentioned, mend in or blend into the new solutions you guys are looking forward to implementing. And maybe you can take advantage of what you already have. And I think that that's something important to think about while you're moving forward in your journey of understanding or thinking about what you want to build in the future here. All right, so let's move on to the next portion here. So I've kind of come up with an example. I'm not sure if I'm being a little too, I guess that's a mid-sized credit union, 150 staff. Maybe 200 is a little closer to mid-sized, I'm not sure. But so we're looking at an example here. The first one's for building. This is mid-sized credit union building a new data warehouse and reporting instance. Maybe it's Tableau, maybe it's Power BI, something like that. And we're integrating a bunch of source systems. I said 10 plus, I think that's pretty reasonable. And maybe 40 plus reports here that maybe you're bringing over from your current solution, or maybe you're buying into some of the canned reports that you might be or in the situation you're building. So you're bringing over a bunch of reports and building new ones for your reporting, your new reporting instance. And I've kind of broken it up into two sections here: analysts and IT staff. That's just kind of the way that my mind works, coming from an IT background. But so on the left side over here, since this is a build solution, like some of the presenters mentioned, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to happen here. And as you can see, we have a few senior data analysts. We have a DBA here. We have somebody from risk that might be working with the security admin on the other side of things, and some other data analysts to back up those senior data analysts. And the reason I mention this is because the DBA is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting in the data warehouse that this hasn't existed in the past. They're going to be building new tables to bring in new data sources, or just adding new tables for current data sources. They're going to be working with the server admins and the senior data analysts to build out new ETL paths. They're going to be building a lot of things, and you're going to need that firing power there. And moving over to the other side of things, if we're looking at IT staff, if cloud-based servers are really nice nowadays, and there's a lot of things that AWS and these other partners are making it a little easier for server admins, but there's still a lot of work to be done, including security patches, making sure the servers are up and running still, and also making sure that licensing is ready to go for those servers. So there's a lot of things that need to happen. And like I mentioned at the bottom, I think that maybe I'm being conservative, maybe I'm being a little too nice to the IT staff, but I think maybe 50% capacity for each of these individuals at least for building and then also maintaining the solution is probably what I recommend from what I've seen in the past. But maybe that'll be different from credit union to credit union. Moving on to the next portion, this is buy. You'll see, obviously, there's a lot less here. There's a lot of responsibility here on your partner that you might be working with in the future. In this situation, they're going to be taking care of the servers themselves, the reporting solution, the data warehouse, adding new tables, all of the heavy lifting is going to be on their side. And in this situation, we have a couple analysts at the credit union itself and a server admin on the credit union side as well. And I mentioned at the bottom, the server admin might not need 50% capacity here just because once things are running smoothly and everything's good day to day, they're there just to back up the senior data analysts and work between the analyst and the partner you might have. I also mentioned that the senior data analysts in this situation are really kind of in a way a middleman or a little project manager in a way, just because they're working between building out these reports and getting the requirements together and sending those to your partner to implement them in some situations. And I think that's worth mentioning. There's a lot of heavy lifting that the analysts might need to take care of there. And just to kind of give it some perspective as well, I wanted to mention, those are both extreme examples, building or buying, but I think that a hybrid approach is something that some people might want to look into as well. And I think that it's important to talk about with the partners that you're looking at. A little bit different here, the partner in this situation is going to be supporting servers and 24/7 monitoring. So they're kind of like an IT provider in this situation. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're working, maybe you don't want to touch the reports or touch the Tableau server, and you just want to take care of the servers, and you're from the credit union perspective, you want to be the server admin, and that's fine. There's a bunch of different ways you can look at this, but in this situation, the partner being the IT admin in this situation, we're bringing a few extra people to staff here, including a couple analysts, and a DBA I think is important here too. Like I mentioned before, that DBA is going to be updating tables and doing the heavy lifting on the data warehouse side of things. So just something to mention there. And I think that this would be something that maybe not all credit unions have the opportunity to do. Maybe they don't have the opportunity to do hybrid, or maybe they don't have the opportunity to do a build on their own. But I think if you can kind of use a partner as a stepping stone to make your way towards being fully independent, if that's what you're looking for, I think that that's something worth noting. And I think that a lot of the partnerships out there and the consultants out there that you might speak to in the future, I think that they're all open to working with those sorts of things. And I think it would be highly beneficial no matter what you guys choose here. But I hope that these three situations that I've brought up here are maybe bringing up some good questions, some solid questions for you guys to think about and for you to consider when you're moving forward, thinking about what that right solution looks good, what that right solution looks like for you guys. So I hope that helps. And whatever solution you guys decide on, it's going to boost your credit union's reporting capabilities and in your data solution in a huge way. Like our previous panelists here have mentioned, it's night and day difference between reporting directly out of the source and reporting with all the data integrated into one data warehouse, and everything's organized, and we'll go over that here in a second. All right, so benefits of either solution or all solutions, whatever solution you pick here. You know, the biggest benefit, like I'd mentioned, what the other panelists mentioned, you know, the improved reporting efficiencies is huge. You know, everything is coming together in one area, everything's organized, everything is being mended together, and everybody's speaking the same language, like I mentioned. It's a night and day difference between some of the credit unions I've spoken with and what we've seen here at St. Mary's and what I've worked with over the past few years. And it's extremely nice to see people that are excited to get reports from the data warehouse team because they now trust that, you know, our reports are more efficient or quicker or more appropriate for what they're looking for day to day. And I think that that's awesome to see on our side. And it's exciting to see people all speaking the same language. It's a big difference. And like people have mentioned in the past, you know, opportunities for advanced reporting, AI, predictive analytics, those are all buzzwords. But I think that putting together a data warehouse like this, it just opens up the possibilities for what you guys can do in the future. And like I said, a stepping stone is getting things organized, getting some operational reporting going, and then in the future, like Kyle mentioned, maybe you're doing predictive analytics where you're working with membership data and you're trying to figure out what the next best product might be, and trying to keep on the bleeding edge of whatever your population might want as the next product or something like that. And I just kind of want to go over a couple of cool examples that we've had in the past few years, some things that we've been working on, and maybe some things that might be of interest to you guys that we've worked on. This is the first one here. So everybody knows the call report. You know, in this specific scenario, we've had great success in building out some reports in our data warehouse in our Tableau environment that basically boosts our accounting department's productivity and basically cut 10, 15 hours from what I've heard off of their reporting cycle every quarter. Basically, they come in here, pick a date, download the data, and then plug it into wherever they need to send that. And I've heard great feedback from our team in this, and it didn't really take us a ton of time. We just needed to take down the requirements and understand what they needed, and basically threw it together and kind of worked with them to tweak it a little bit. And I don't think we've touched this report in a very long time, and they seem to enjoy it every quarter, and that's great to hear. I like to hear positive feedback like that. And in 2020, we had a very big initiative to give us basically an overview of our member. And I know there's a few, like in Epicus, our core system, there was a 360 member view that people use, and that was great, but I think it was missing a lot of details that our retail staff needed. And basically, we were asked to put together a member overview report where you can see at the top left-hand corner, you can enter that member number, and it basically gives you an overview of the member without giving a better description. But it gave our retail staff a really quick view into our membership, or our member, in what they had, their accounts, their recurring transactions based on ACH history. And also, you know, we looked at our transactions from debit cards or just any type of transaction. And the recurring transaction's been huge for us for cross-selling. If you see somebody that has a credit card that's not a part of your credit union, they're able to just quickly look down and say, oh, look, you know, they don't have a credit card. You guys, are you interested in getting a credit card through St. Mary's? We have some great options for you. And at the very bottom, it shows this person doesn't have any branch history, unfortunately, but this would show a count of how many times that person's entered a branch in the past 6 months and what sort of transactions they're doing at those branches. So this has been, I think, one of our most used reports this year, and I think that it's really boosted our usage in Tableau. It's been very fantastic to hear all the feedback we've had from it, and I think it's been a huge win for us. And I do have a couple more examples. I don't have images of them because if I brought them to this presentation, it would have a big black box in the center, and you guys wouldn't be able to see the good chunk of it. So at least I'll explain a couple of these examples here. One big initiative we had this year was working on operational efficiencies, and we were asked to put together some reports to support our operations team and our deposit operations, loan operations, mortgage. And basically we were putting together reports that some of the teams were able to basically work from every day. They logged in, they opened the report, and the underwriters saw the top 10 most important loans that they need to underwrite based on whatever priority that they given to me in requirements, and they were able to work down those and get those loans out the door and be efficient with their pipeline. Another one was we had introduced ITMs into our branches, integrated teller machines. I'm sorry, I can't remember what the acronym is, but basically it's a more technology friendly. It's a teller machine that they could also phone into our member contact center, do a little bit more. We actually opened a branch where it's only ITMs and we don't even have any tellers. So we were able to set up a balancing report for our accounting team because the reporting that came with the ITMs was not able to support what we needed. So we were able to set that up in a couple days, and they were able to start balancing out the machines and see if there were any inconsistencies and really help out the accounting staff there. And what else? We also had a report that we built out for COVID related. Actually, we had a few of those, but the main one that I wanted to mention today was COVID branch activity. So we were able to build a report that was able to show any differences in after we closed our lobbies and only had our drive ups open. Was there a decrease or increase of branch activity after that event occurred? And what we wanted to, do we need to react to anything that we saw in the report and allow our SPG or any of our retail staff to basically help out our membership if there's any problems there. So that was a big one for us. So just in closing, I just want to harp on a few things here. So do a thorough evaluation of your current staff and technology. I think that's extremely important. I think that the people you have on hand maybe they have talents you don't know they have, and maybe they're excited to learn something new. One of your analysts might know Tableau by the name of it, but maybe they want to jump into it. So just evaluate what you currently have who you currently have on staff, and think about those pieces of software that you might already have and see how you could utilize those in the future. And like I mentioned before, a hybrid approach for building out this solution is I think probably a good solution if you guys can't decide. I think that there's a lot of people out there that think maybe they have the ability to build out portions of what they're looking for, and maybe a partner can help them boost their reporting solution to the next level. And building a data warehouse, I think, is huge for our current market and our current credit union environment. I think being competitive in your area and making sure that you're meeting your membership's needs, I think having that data warehouse is a huge thing, and it brings your reporting to the next level. And I think that's very important for everybody to set up with their credit union. And get your credit union speaking the same language. Everybody should really be using that. And my previous manager, Melissa Pomeroy, she might be on here today. She kept harping on this for me, but getting everybody using that single source of truth is extremely important for everybody speaking the same language and having reporting be consistent throughout your organization. And I think that's extremely important. And again, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. If anybody wants to reach out to me about talking about staffing, data warehouse, or anything like that, it's a very interesting topic to me, and I'd like to hear more about that. So please feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. We've got time for a couple of questions right here before the end. Dan, who I believe right out of Road, asked, a lot of vendors want to sell you on the benefits of data, like solutions that have predictive modeling, segmentation, attrition modeling. Should any time or money be spent on these until you have built or bought a mature warehouse? Or what kind of balance would you recommend in approaching that? And I would say, Mark, start with, and then anyone else who might want to jump in from our panelists.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, and I've heard from other credit unions that are partnering with these different solutions, is it takes time, I think, in maturing your data set once you bring it into the data warehouse to really start to do predictive analysis. I don't think there's one model out there that's going to solve everybody's problems. And I think it just takes some time to ramp up to that. And that's kind of what we've seen. I think a lot of people just want to buy it and just get it done. And I don't think that that's possible in a lot of situations, but maybe there's something out there. Maybe Kyle or Johnny has that solution.
Wonderful, thank you. We are going to continue with a little bit of Q&A, but I just wanted to say anybody who had a hard stop at 4, thank you so much for attending, and we will send out the deck and recording. But let's carry on with the Q&A for a little bit. If we go over a little bit, so be it. Kyle, Johnny, did you have anything you wanted to add to that question?
I think the only thing I'd add is I think, yeah, it depends on where you are in the journey. If you're looking to focus more on the predictive or prescriptive modeling that's out there, again, as I was mentioning earlier in my own section, it's really only going to be as good as the data itself. So making sure that you have that data warehouse in place first to make sure that the decisions you're making based on the predictive nature of the models are being made on accurate data. So that's the only thing I would add is I do think it's important to have that data warehouse, that holistic solution in place before you can get down the road of the predictive aspect, just because you need to make sure that the data integrity is there.
I would just add,
Awesome.
I think going into the data warehouse conversation with some of those things in mind is great. It gives you something to strive for and move towards. I wouldn't discount that there are some value you can get from taking some small approaches to get things done, but just know, I think, as Johnny just said, that you're going to have a limited view and a limited source of truth if you're just taking core data or just taking plastics data or just taking loan data. And that's really the challenge with approaching it. It's not that you can't, it's just you need to recognize the limited view that you're starting with in order to get to those items. And it's much broader when you get to a true data warehouse.
Great, thank you. One quick question I've seen a couple times was how would you designate a small, medium, and a large credit union? I don't know that I have a great answer to that. From the benchmarking shop being Callahan, I'd say Navy probably thinks everyone's a small credit union, and it does have quite a bit to do with scope. That said, most credit unions are under $200 million, so it's very much a direction of what you're looking at. And I don't know that I want to tread on that any further, but if other people wanted to specify, feel free.
There is more about I will say this, there's more about strategy and what you're wanting to accomplish that is more important than the size of the credit union. And there are partners and tools that can help all of those. So I'm not trying to dodge the question, because we can give definitions and all three of us would give different lines where we would mark that. But we work with enough credit unions that we see, a $40 million to $75 million credit union that's acting very differently and really driving towards something that a $250 or so million credit union wouldn't. And I might normally put those into a different category, obviously, than a billion
Yes.
or 2.5 billion or 10. So I really think it comes back to what you're trying to accomplish in your strategy. And then there are tool sets and the right approach that you can handle, even if you consider yourself small or mid-size or large.
I like that, Kyle. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's how well and how you're serving members. There's plenty of credit unions with differences in the number of assets versus the number of members, and it comes back to the overall purpose and mission, I think. More of a tactical question. Jim asked, which comes first? So, jumping back to 2 questions ago, that was about warehousing. But if we could look at warehousing and a reporting tool, would you say it would be, what's the cart and the horse there? Should you get a Tableau or a Power BI or whatnot, and then add a data warehouse, or vice versa? I know I have my thoughts on that, but I'd rather consult the panel here.
You want to go, Johnny?
Sure. Yes, I think from our perspective, it depends on what you're looking to report out on. If you're looking to report on a single source system for a very specific reason, then I think it makes all the sense in the world to visualize that data. At the same time, if you're looking, again, for that single source of truth, rather than, I think maybe it was Kyle who referred to it as a limited source of truth, then you're going to want to have that warehouse in place. What we at Arkatechture have done typically is combine both into one full tool set that I referred to earlier, is that lean data pipeline. So making sure that you have all the pieces in place so that you can get off the ground running and have everything that you need from the get-go. But again, it's hard to do one without the other. I think they're very connected, unless you're looking for a very specific use case of just visualizing some specific data from a singular source.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because I'm coming from a large data lake background, more data is better, but I think that honestly, I would have a hard time not having a data warehouse and building out and coming up with a good reason not to have a Tableau instance or something like that. I just think that relating everything together from all these different source systems is highly important. I know every chance we get, we try to add a new source to our data warehouse, and we keep getting asked for new sources, and it just seems to expand our possibilities more and more in relating all of those systems together. And like mentioned 1,000 times, single source of truth. It's extremely important. But I would say having a data warehouse is extremely important in my eyes to building out some sort of visualization tool. But maybe there's different situations out there. So.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the scope of the visualization tool. It's one thing to have a BI team serving the business units and using a tool like that to really explore and figure out how to answer questions to get buy-in to support the, to essentially support the spend to get a warehouse, to get, Tableau or Power BI for everybody all the way down to the front line. So it depends on how we're looking at it. I know that just being able to explore your data and start to see and ask the questions you want to ask is one reason why I think, any analyst should have a visualization tool. But in terms of an enterprise rollout, I agree.
I think that's well stated. The tool itself can provide some of the security, the endpoint delivery, and definitely when you think about development of your staff, getting them into a tool. And we're on a Tableau, focus call here. That's a perfect tool set that can scale broadly, but for a full mature data journey, you're going to want the data warehouse. But there's nothing wrong with getting someone familiar with a tool that can scale with you.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to come back to this year, I think, across all the groups, regardless of whether you're using Tableau or Power BI or Click or whatever, is very much, okay, how do we help people get started? And I think that this has given great context around the importance of this kind of data centralization and the thought process that needs to surround it. But I definitely don't want anybody listening in to feel like I'm an analyst. I don't know how to get buy-in for this. Do I just quit today and go back to making pivot tables? No, keep doing that too. But yeah, I think this is the how do you think 3 steps ahead kind of thing, or how do you think what our next step is, depending where you are. Let me see one more question here. I don't want to keep anybody too long. I did like these reporting questions people had, and Marshall had asked some of back to your question, Mark, about what kind of reporting questions do people really want to talk about, which was, he said census data from member analytics, and then also automating text analytics from member satisfaction surveys as priority points. Any thoughts on those?
We don't do a lot of texting information within our credit union. I don't know, guys. Do you have anything on that? Sorry.
I think, Johnny, I think I'll throw it to you. The census data and bringing in extra data sources is definitely, I see that throughout the industry happening more and more. I know Arkatechture has some specific expertise in that area.
Yeah, I'll need to get back to you, Charlotte, on the specific use cases that we have. It's definitely possible to bring in any data sources that you want. What percentage we see bringing in census data, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think the possibility is definitely there.
I will.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, the only thing I can think about just from cleaning data perspective, I feel like a lot of the situations where we brought in census data or other outside data sources that are not coming from source systems, sometimes there's a lot of work in cleaning up that data to get it ready for blending together with your membership. I think that that's something that maybe working with a partner, if you're not ready for that sort of thing, would be perfect. But honestly, that's a huge job sometimes to clean up that data that's maybe been scraped from something, or maybe you're pulling something from a government agency website. That can be a little bit of work sometimes.
I mean,
as someone who Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Kyle.
That's all right. So we've seen a lot of pandemic data being pulled in over the last, 6 to 9 months. There's obviously the not census specific, but industry related data that can be pulled in from trusted sources that is a little bit less concerning as far as cleaning it up. But that's a great point, Mark, about the cleanup that has to happen when you don't know the trust in your data, the data sources coming in. You end up doing a lot of quality control rules, which is a whole other side of a data warehouse I don't even think we really talked about today.
Yeah, I'd agree. As someone who works a lot with census data, just on my own work side, it's almost that classic thing where you go to buy a tube of toothpaste and there's 50 kinds. You really need to know what you're working with in order to get the right thing. Although it's nice that it actually only updates, a couple times a year max for the American Community Survey. But there's a couple fun areas I do think, depending on what your setup is, that you can use for potentially for branch scoping, for understanding your impact. Say you can integrate it with your lending data to understand, house value, incomes, those kinds of things. But there's a stretch there, I would say. One more quick question, so I'm not forcing everyone too long, but Jim asked, and I liked this, which is any data you shouldn't bring in. And I don't know if that's an answer, but we could probably have some answers to it.
Not sure.
Dirty data?
I think maybe it depends on what you're looking to do with it and how it's going to impact the cost benefit analysis. I mean, if there's specific data that you're using for member segmentation and marketing purposes that may not sit in a primary source system, then it could very well make sense to pull it in. If you're pulling it in just for the sake of it and you're driving up your cost from a storage or compute standpoint, maybe not. So maybe it's all about the use case of what are you actually looking to do with that data.
Maybe if you're sunsetting a product in 6 months, maybe you don't want to add that as a data source. Maybe it'd be a lot of effort to bring in a bunch of tables and then it's gone 6 months later. But.
Yeah. We also have the unique compliance and security requirements in our industry that sometimes things around, I know credit unions specifically are not pulling in certain credit card data. They're masking it. They're finding other ways to approach it. So when you think of what not to pull in, there might be business reasons why you want data masked or somehow tokenized so that you can use it and get the business value, but you don't actually want that data to be visible or accessible beyond just profile rules and other rules you have in reporting. I'm not sure if that's probably not the angle you were taking, but that's a key one that does come up in conversations about that decision on what to do with sensitive data, PII related data that you want or don't want in your system.
Excellent. If anyone has any last questions, go ahead and put them in. But otherwise, I think that wraps them up. Thank you, gentlemen, so much, Mark, Kyle, Johnny, and everybody who's helped put this together. Really appreciate that. This was a lot of fun. I hope people on the phone behind these screens have enjoyed it. And I will include people's contact information and whatnot in both the follow-up email and in the deck we'll send out. And I think they would very much agree with me and say, please don't hesitate to reach out if you've got questions or want to bounce ideas around. I think that's one of definitely the driving force of why we got this group together, which is we're a collaborative industry. We're kind of silly in a good way about how much we actually talk to each other. As someone who came out of the banking side, I can say that. And it's such a good thing. So never hesitate. Always just jump out. The worst thing you get is a no, right? And you almost never do. So thank you everybody who attended, all of you who presented, and have a wonderful rest of the day and a great week. And here's to 2021. Thank you for kicking us off, gentlemen. And I will follow up with all the contents here after the fact. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.